Hello, people. So this video is intended as a setup for our two assigned readings for Wednesday's class at 10:30 that we're going to be discussing. So we've got John Hospers on artistic creativity and creation, and we've got Mark Banks on the politics of cultural work. So John Hospers' reading is, as you'll have seen, is quite evidently a very philosophical reflection on what creativity is, or what he thinks it is and what he thinks it might be. But I think that its real value is that it acknowledges the difficulty of actually speaking philosophically and critically about what creativity is. So he covers a number of areas that I really want to open up and discuss, and I'll do that in another video that I'm going to shoot and post probably after Wednesday's class, so sometime before the weekend. I'll put up another video on that. But I just wanted to introduce you to that mode, which is the philosophical mode, and that pertains to the sort of comments and descriptions, the comments on or descriptions of creativity that we're going to be looking at in this course that run throughout the history of thought and ideas. So we'll be working in that mode, but trying to bridge what Hospers is doing and our own version of what he's doing to what Banks is doing, which I see as a more of an economic and sociological analysis of the cultural industries and an acknowledgement of how the definition of the creative arts has changed. And that was something that we discussed on the first class last Wednesday, this widening of the parameters of what the creative arts might actually mean. So Banks is really working in a more contemporary mode, and I want to bring these two approaches together. And as we explore our own way of approaching these, working in these two modes, I want these two readings to sort of give us inspiration and guidance, of course. Okay, so I wanted to make a few remarks about reading and how you might approach reading. So there's two things that I'm really interested in with these readings, but also with any of the readings that come for the rest of the semester. So the first approach is I would invite you to look into each author. So don't just pick up the text and start reading and not ask questions about who you're actually reading. So I want you to ask, who is John Hospers and who is Mark Banks, right? And start to look around a little bit online, wherever you can find some information. You don't have to spend much time, maybe 10 minutes or so, just figuring out who these people are and where they come from, because I think the context is very important. So Hospers, for example, happens to be an American, and his home discipline is philosophy, quite evidently, right? So start thinking about the implications of these biographical details and how that might be informing the kinds of statements that each person is making, and they're just their arguments overall, and of course their conceptions of what creativity and the creative arts are. So thinking about those background details can be quite relevant. Okay, so I'll be talking about the context for each writer as we go, and for the rest of the semester as well. So thinking about that's one thing, and the second thing that I want you to do when you're engaging with these readings is to think not just in terms of understanding or coming to grips what each author is saying, so like the meaning of their arguments. Trying to grasp what they're saying is important, but beyond that, I want you to also think about the assumptions that are embedded in their arguments, the values that they hold that are actually causing them, or arguably causing them, to say what they're saying. Okay, what do I mean by this? John Hospers, for example, talks loads about creativity, but his notion of what creativity is very clearly tied to a certain Western tradition and a classical tradition as well. Like, he uses very high art examples and canonized. His examples are all drawn from a recognizable canon. So, for example, in talking about art, the paradigm example of an artistic genius for him is Amadeus Mozart. Okay, the paradigm example of a philosopher, or at least the philosopher to whom he refers most, is of course Aristotle. Right, so we're talking about a deep, antiquated tradition, classical Greece. Okay, classical Greek philosophy. So thinking in these terms and just acknowledging, being quite aware of what's potentially driving and shaping the arguments and the claims that each author is making is really something that I want to look at. Okay, so we're taking more of a bird's eye view, or looking at the broader picture, and not just trying to read sentence by sentence and paragraph by paragraph to get the gist of what each person's saying. Okay, so I'm thinking bigger than that. All right, so these are the two things that I want to do, and I think it's a really great practice for reading critically. All right, we're going to roll up our sleeves. We're going to get into this on Wednesday. I'm going to ask you to start off, if you have any questions or any issues with the reading, if there's anything you don't understand or anything you want to discuss, I'm going to ask you what you've enjoyed most about it, what you haven't enjoyed, and we'll go slowly, we'll go gently, and then we'll get into some of the more finer details of the readings through the session. And then, as I said, I will follow up that session by posting a video on the Hospers, probably not on the banks, but we will be discussing both those readings on Wednesday's class. Okay, so looking very forward to it, and I hope you've all had a great weekend and that your week this week is shaping up quite nicely. Okay, we'll talk soon. See you virtually in class.